8 years, 19 specialists, and not one of them had said the thing that would have changed everything on the first day. Vivienne Aldren ran a pharmaceutical company worth $2.3 billion from a corner office on the 31st floor of the Aldren Solutions Tower. And she had done it for 4 years through an arrangement no one in her professional orbit had ever been asked to formally acknowledge. She sat through board meetings with her right arm braced against her ribs. She signed documents with her left hand when the pain climbed above a certain threshold. She had learned, across 8 years and more medical appointments than she once believed a single body could require, to construct a life that moved around the thing rather than through it. The world had accommodated this so completely that no one questioned it anymore. No one, that is, until the maintenance supervisor came to fix the thermostat in the executive corridor on a Wednesday morning in March. He was there for 11 minutes. He did not speak to her. He looked at her once, for approximately 6 seconds, from across the length of the hallway. Then he finished his work, wrote something on his clipboard, and left. He was back the following morning. Not for the thermostat. Douglas Finch was 47 years old and had worked as the facilities maintenance supervisor for the Aldren Solutions building for just over 2 years. Before that, he had worked for a building management company in Cleveland. Before that, for 8 months, he had worked at almost nothing, which is what grief does to the schedule when the schedule belonged to 2 people, and suddenly there is only one. His wife's name was Mara. She had died of an aortic dissection on a Sunday evening in November, 9 minutes after they arrived at the emergency room, and 4 minutes after Douglas had identified himself as a licensed physical therapist with 17 years of clinical experience and a specialization in chronic pain neuroscience. The attending had nodded at that information and then proceeded without reference to it, because in that room, in that moment, Douglas was not a clinician. He was the husband. Those were different things, and the distance between them was the longest distance he had ever crossed. He had not renewed his clinical license since. He raised his son, Eli, who was 10 years old and had a habit of narrating documentaries in real time and leaving his shoes in whatever location most required them not to be there. Douglas ironed Eli's school shirts on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, using the ironing board that still stood in the corner of the bedroom where Mara had left it. He woke at 5:40 each morning, started the coffee, and packed Eli's lunch before waking him. Because if Eli woke first, he would spend 40 minutes watching something on YouTube and then claim he hadn't had time to eat. The small disciplines, the ones that hold a structure upright, when the structure was built for more people than currently occupy it. He kept his clinical textbooks in a box in the closet of the second bedroom. He kept one on the nightstand, a worn paperback on central sensitization. Its spine cracked in 3 places, but he did not open it. He had not opened it in 22 months. Its presence was not optimism. It was something he had not yet decided how to categorize. There was an envelope on the kitchen counter, half buried under Eli's library notice, and a bill from the pediatric dentist. It had a return address from the Ohio Physical Therapy Association. Douglas knew what it contained without opening it. He had known for 6 weeks. The envelope had sat in its current position for 19 days. Vivienne had not noticed Douglas Finch until the Wednesday morning, when she came out of the executive conference room, and he was crouched at the wall panel of the hallway thermostat, his toolbox open beside him, writing on his clipboard in the careful, deliberate way of a person whose handwriting is smaller than it needs to be. She had passed him without acknowledgement, not from cruelty, but from the particular tunnel vision of a person managing too many parallel threads. She had been holding her right arm against her side, the way she always held it, the way she had held it for so long that the gesture no longer felt like a gesture at all. It felt like posture. It felt like how she stood. Douglas had looked up once, just once, for 6 seconds. She did not think about it again until the following morning when Patricia, her executive assistant, appeared in the doorway wearing the expression she had trained into careful neutrality over 11 years of managing someone important. "The facility's supervisor is here," Patricia said. "He asked if he could speak with you directly. He said it was a brief matter regarding the air quality report." Vivienne did not look up from the document she was reviewing. "Send him to building management." He said specifically that it concerned the executive floor and required your sign-off. She looked up. "Fine, 2 minutes." Douglas Finch entered without extending his hand, which she noticed. He set his clipboard on the edge of the chair across from her desk and remained standing, which she also noticed. "The air quality report is current," he said. "There's nothing wrong with it. I'm sorry for the misdirection." Vivienne set down her pen. The silence she produced was not hostile. It was the kind that asks a question without committing to the question. "Yesterday morning," he said, "in the hallway, I noticed the way you were holding your arm." He paused. "Not the arm itself, the way you were protecting it. The position was guarding, not structural. Your shoulder was relaxed. Your neck was relaxed. The pain isn't in the joint or the nerve root. Your brain is generating it." He said this the way a person says something they have been working up to. Not dramatically, but with the quiet specificity of someone who has spent time on the phrasing. "I'm a maintenance supervisor," he added. "I understand if that means this conversation is over." Vivienne looked at him for a long moment. "It's not over," she said. She found his file through the building management company that held the facility's contract. Douglas Aaron Finch. Licensed physical therapist, Ohio. Initial licensure 17 years prior. Clinical specialty: chronic pain neuroscience, central sensitization syndrome, neuroplastic pain presentations. Published co-author on 2 peer-reviewed papers on treatment outcomes in persistent regional pain disorders. License status: active, renewal pending. Current employer: Meridian Facilities Group assigned to Aldren Solutions Tower, 26 months. She read the file twice. Then she sat back and looked at the ceiling and said, "To no one in particular, why is he fixing thermostats?" She arranged a meeting for the following Tuesday, not in her office. In the 22nd floor conference room, which was used for vendor presentations and sat empty on Tuesday mornings. She told Patricia to schedule it as an ergonomics assessment, which was close enough to the truth not to require further explanation. Douglas arrived with nothing except his building badge and a jacket that was clean and slightly worn at the right cuff. He sat across from her at the long table and waited with the patience of a person who has learned that the first few minutes of a difficult conversation belong to the other person. "You said my brain is generating the pain," Vivienne said. "Every physician I've seen for 8 years has told me the pain is real." "It is real," Douglas said. "That's not what I said." He paused. "Central sensitization syndrome. Your nervous system has been operating in a heightened alarm state for so long that the brain's pain signaling network has essentially rewired itself. It no longer requires ongoing tissue damage to produce pain. The signal fires because the pathway has been reinforced thousands of times, and the brain has learned to interpret normal sensory input as threat. The pain is completely real. The source of it isn't where everyone has been looking." 8 years, she said. "It's underdiagnosed at a rate that borders on systemic failure. Most physicians are trained to look for structural causes. When they don't find one, they don't always know what else to look for, and some patients, particularly high-functioning, high-control individuals, are very good at presenting in ways that make the condition harder to identify." She looked at him. "You saw it in 6 seconds." "I saw the position. I'd spent 6 years learning to look for it." He looked at his hands, and then I stopped. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because I was very good at something, and I still wasn't good enough when it mattered most. After that, I wasn't sure I had the right to keep asking people to trust it. Vivienne did not respond immediately. She held a silence that receives rather than fills. "What caused mine?" she said. It was not entirely a question. Something that happened 8 years ago. Something the pain arrived with. Central sensitization almost always has a point of origin, a physical injury, a surgical event, or a psychological trauma significant enough to trigger the nervous system into sustained alarm. The pain becomes the body's way of expressing something the mind has learned not to express directly. Vivienne went very still. "I'd like you to leave," she said quietly. Douglas stood. He paused at the door without turning around. "The treatment doesn't require me," he said. "It requires you to stop running from the thing that started it." He left. Vivienne sat in the empty conference room for 14 minutes before going back to her office. She had been in the car with her sister when it happened. Rebecca, 24 years old, passenger seat, early morning in October, a stretch of highway outside Columbus where the sun came through the overpass at exactly the angle that blinded Vivienne for approximately 3 seconds. 3 seconds. The investigation had found no fault. The insurance had settled. Her family had said over time the things families say. She had rebuilt. She had done what people do. The pain in her right arm had begun 6 weeks later. The same arm that had gripped the steering wheel. Stuart Gould appeared at her office door on Thursday at 4:15, unscheduled. He had managed the company's day-to-day operations for 4 years and had developed, in that time, the particular ease of a person who has come to mistake access for permission. He sat across from her and used the words liability and professional boundaries with the measured care of someone who had rehearsed the precise distance between each one. "There are concerns," he said, "about the nature of your interactions with building staff. I want to make sure we're protecting you properly." Vivienne looked at him with the eyes of someone who has just realized she has been reading the wrong version of a document for a very long time. "Thank you, Stuart," she said. "I'll keep that in mind." He left satisfied. He should not have been. Douglas's employment was flagged for review on a Friday. The notification from Meridian Facilities Group used the phrase conduct review. Informal patient contact, pending investigation. The language was careful. The complaint had been routed through a third-party coordination firm. Douglas listened to the voicemail in the parking lot of Eli's school and stood there for a moment with his phone in his hand. Then he went inside and picked up his son, who had had a good day and wanted to explain the history project they'd started on the space race, specifically the part about the people who built the rocket engines and never got famous for it. Douglas listened to the whole thing on the drive home. He asked 2 follow-up questions. They stopped for groceries. He made pasta. Patricia found Vivienne the name behind the complaint form on Monday morning. It was a shell entity, registered 18 months prior, associated with a consulting arrangement that traced back through 2 intermediary companies to a private advisory relationship with Stuart Gould. The arrangement had been in place for 6 years. The consulting firm specialized in long-term care placement and pharmaceutical treatment management. Its revenue model depended on sustained patient dependency. Vivienne asked Patricia to pull the full internal records from the company's medical advisory board. She spent an evening going through them with the focused attention she normally reserved for acquisition due diligence. What she found arranged itself into a pattern with the cold clarity of something that has always been there, waiting for the right frame. 3 points in her treatment history where a promising specialist had been quietly redirected. 2 instances where a proposed treatment approach had been modified through the advisory process before reaching her. 1 email from Stuart Gould's account to the medical advisory coordinator sent 4 days before a scheduled consultation with a pain neuroscience specialist from Johns Hopkins. "Let's hold on the referral until after the Q3 review. We need stability in the leadership continuity narrative right now." The Hopkins specialist had never been rescheduled. Vivienne locked the files in the cabinet behind her desk and sent Patricia home. Eli Finch had not been told the specifics of his father's employment situation, because Douglas had not told him, because some things a person manages alone until they become manageable. What Eli had been told was that his father was taking some personal days, which Eli accepted with the equanimity of a 10-year-old, who trusted that personal days were a real and sufficient category of explanation. On Wednesday afternoon, Eli was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when he drew a picture on the back of his math worksheet. He had been thinking, he told his father later, about the people who built the rocket engines and didn't get famous. He drew a woman in a tall building with big windows. She was holding her arm. There was a door open behind her. He drew his father standing in the doorway with a tool belt, but the tool belt had a small star on it, because the star was for his mom, so she'd know he still thought she was watching. Douglas looked at the drawing for a long time. He folded it carefully and put it in the front pocket of his jacket. He called the number Patricia had given him at 7:30 that evening. "I know what Stuart did," Vivienne said. "I know why, and I'm not finished." "I'm not practicing," he said. "I know. Come Thursday morning, not to the office. Patricia will send you an address. Just come." The address was a suite in a medical arts building, 3 blocks from the tower. A colleague of Patricia's who ran a small rehabilitation practice had offered the space on Thursday mornings when the practice was closed. It had a treatment table and a clear stretch of floor and enough quiet to hear yourself breathe, which was everything the work required. The first Thursday, Douglas asked about Rebecca. Vivienne gave him the shortened version first, the one she had given in medical contexts for 8 years, the one with dates and facts and the word accident used as a complete explanation. Douglas listened without interrupting, without leaning forward, without the subtle performance of someone waiting to speak. He simply received what she offered and waited. It took 40 minutes to arrive at the full version. When she said her sister's name, not as data, not in a clinical context, but as the actual name of a person she had loved and driven toward a sun-blinded intersection on a Tuesday morning in October, the name came out differently than it had in any doctor's office, like something that had been compressed for so long that saying it plainly required more air than she expected. "Was that the first time?" Douglas asked, saying it that way. "Yes," she said, "in the way that counts." The second Thursday, he taught her a technique from the pain neuroscience protocol he had developed in the final 2 years of his clinical practice. Graded motor imagery combined with controlled breath work, a method for gradually reintroducing the nervous system to the idea that movement was not threat. The theory behind central sensitization was that the brain's alarm system had been recalibrated at too low a threshold, so ordinary sensation triggered a pain response. The treatment was not about forcing the body. It was about patient, persistent negotiation with a nervous system that had spent years learning the wrong lesson. He guided her through the first sequence, visualizing movement before attempting it. Controlled breath. Small invitation, not command. 20 minutes in, she raised her right arm above shoulder height for the first time in 4 years. She held it there for 3 seconds. Then she lowered it carefully. Neither of them spoke. Douglas kept his eyes on his own hands, resting flat on the table in front of him. Vivienne looked at the window. The room held the particular silence of something that has been waiting a long time to happen and has finally, quietly, arrived. Stuart Gould called an emergency board session for a Monday. The stated agenda was a leadership continuity review, citing an internal concern regarding CEO decision-making capacity following, as the language carefully read, undisclosed informal medical engagement with non-credentialed personnel. He had the legal team's preliminary opinion attached. He had spoken individually to 5 board members over the weekend. He did not have the documents Vivienne had already placed on the table, before he arrived. She walked in without the arm brace. The room noticed the absence before it noticed anything else. The absence of the familiar gesture, the arm held against the ribs, the careful accommodation they had all silently arranged their expectations around for 4 years. She moved at her own pace, not performing anything, simply moving, each step landing with a steadiness that had not been there before. She sat at the head of the table. Stuart Gould was in the middle of his opening remarks. "I've been looking forward to this meeting," she said, "because it clarifies a number of things." She opened the folder she had prepared and slid the first set of documents to the center of the table. Original medical advisory correspondence, pulled directly from the archive without routing through the COO's coordination office. 3 redirections of treatment consultation over 6 years, she said. "I've marked the dates and the names of the specialists who were never rescheduled." She slid a second set alongside the first. Internal communications between the COO's office and Carrington Care Partners, a pharmaceutical management consultancy. Mr. Gould has received advisory compensation from Carrington totaling $1.4 million over 6 years. Carrington's primary revenue comes from sustained long-term neurological treatment management. Its interest in my continued illness is, at minimum, in conflict with my own. She placed a third document at the table's edge, the Finch-Nakamura Study, 2021. A peer-reviewed clinical paper demonstrating that central sensitization syndrome, when accurately diagnosed, shows significant symptom reduction in over 65% of cases with appropriate intervention. This paper was available during 6 separate consultations I received over the past 3 years. It was not introduced to me by any of the specialists involved. Stuart stood. His voice, when it came, was low and measured. "Vivienne, you've been subjected to an informal and unlicensed." "I raised my arm above my shoulder this morning," she said, "for the first time in 4 years." She lifted it now, briefly, plainly, and set it back down. "I'd appreciate your explanation of how that represents compromised judgment." He did not have one. The board chair asked Stuart to excuse himself pending an independent audit. He used the word pending in the way it is used when something is already settled. Stuart Gould left the room. He did not return to the building. Douglas was in the parking structure when his phone rang. Patricia told him the situation had resolved and that Vivienne had asked whether he was nearby. He drove to the building, rode the elevator to the 31st floor, and sat in a chair in the corridor outside the conference room. He waited, because it was what was available to him, and it was enough. The conference room door opened 40 minutes later. Vivienne crossed the corridor without the brace, without the accommodation, at the pace her body offered. She stopped a few feet from him. He stood. "Patricia told me about the employment complaint," she said. "I've had it formally withdrawn." "I know. I saw the notification this morning." She looked at him for a moment. "You told me the treatment doesn't require you, that it requires me to face the thing that started it." "Yes, you were right, but that's not the whole thing." He waited. "Well, now. You walked into this building to fix a thermostat," she said, "and you saw in 6 seconds what 19 specialists didn't see in 8 years. That's not someone who lost the ability to help people. That's someone who stopped believing he was allowed to." Douglas looked toward the window at the end of the corridor. The afternoon light was doing what it does in late March in Ohio, arriving at an angle that makes ordinary buildings briefly beautiful. "My wife died because I signed the consent form as a family member and not as a clinician," he said. "And if my judgment wasn't enough then, I didn't know what it was worth after." "She didn't die because of your judgment," Vivienne said. "You know that." "Most days." "The envelope on your counter," she said, "from the licensing board." He didn't ask how she knew. She had read him the way he had read her, with patience and a willingness to look at what was actually there. "Open it," she said, "not for me." not for anyone else. Because the alternative is that you keep fixing thermostats while the people who need what you actually know keep seeing doctors who don't. He said nothing for a moment, then, "How's the arm?" She raised it, deliberately, to eye level, and held it there. She didn't perform the significance of it. She simply looked at him with the eyes of a person who has set down something she has been carrying for 8 years. "Open the envelope," she said. 2 months later, on a Thursday morning in late May, Douglas sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a renewal declaration he had been filling out over 4 evenings, one section at a time, with patience for the fear and patience for himself. He was reviewing it for the last time before mailing it back. His phone buzzed on the table, Vivienne's name on the screen. "Physical therapy appointment this morning. First one I've scheduled for myself in 8 years. Thought you should know." He read it twice, then he put the renewal declaration in its return envelope, sealed it, and set it in the outgoing mail tray by the door. Eli came into the kitchen in his soccer uniform, looking for his shin guards, which were in the same place they always were, not where he had left them, but where Douglas had put them. "Is that the doctor envelope?" Eli asked, spotting the return address on the tray. "It's the physical therapist envelope," Douglas said, "but yes." Eli found his shin guards. He sat down across from his father and ate the toast Douglas had made without being asked to make it, the way he had recently started doing small things he had watched his father do for years. In the unannounced way, children begin to understand that care is something transmitted through repetition. "Is Miss Vivienne coming to the game Saturday?" Eli asked. Douglas looked at the envelope in the tray, then at his son, then at the window above the sink, where the May morning was arriving the way ordinary mornings do. Without ceremony and without apology. "I'll ask her," he said. Eli considered this sufficient. He finished his toast. Douglas sat in the kitchen of his apartment on a Thursday morning, and felt not happiness yet, exactly, but the thing that precedes it. The sense that a locked room has been opened, and whatever is on the other side is not what he had spent 2 years afraid of finding. 8 years is not a verdict. It is a length of time during which the wrong question kept being asked. The right question was simple, and it required only someone willing to stop looking for damage and start looking at the person. Douglas Finch had looked for 6 seconds. That was enough to begin. What came after? The Thursdays, the slow negotiation between Vivienne's nervous system and its own alarm. The afternoon she walked into a board meeting and set down a folder and raised her arm. None of that happened in 6 seconds. None of it happened alone. The envelope was in the outgoing mail by 9 in the morning. Eli was at school. The apartment was quiet in the specific way. Apartments are quiet when a child has just left, still warm with the presence of someone who will be back. Douglas refilled his coffee, picked up the worn paperback from the nightstand where it had sat unopened for 22 months, and carried it to the kitchen table. He opened it to the first page.